Hello everyone, thanks for taking a minute to grow. My name is Dustin Cohn. I'm this year's horticulture intern for the Solo counties, and today we're going to be talking about basil. So basil is this herb I have right here. And basil is very universal. You can use it in a lot of your pasta sauces, on your tomato sauces, or on your pizza, or in pesto. It's a very herb that's used in a lot of Italian dishes, and I really like to use it in a lot of the food I cook. So kind of the needs that basil has. Basil is a full sun plant, and I water just when the soil gets dry, so it's very easy to care for in that sense. But kind of one thing that it does need is, so when basil is starting to come into bloom, you're going to want to make sure you cut the blooms off, because if you leave the blooms and they flower, it will actually make the flavor of your basil leaves turn bitter, and you really won't want to eat it when it turns bitter because it gets kind of gross. So to kind of stop it from blooming, you'll actually just take like your snips or your fingers, and you'll go through, and you can kind of see here I have one that's getting kind of tall, and it hasn't set bloom yet, but it's getting pretty close. So you'll go in, and I just cut it where it kind of wise, and then you'll get rid of this bloom. And you can still use the leaves off this in a dish if you want, but you just want to make sure that your plant doesn't bloom. And as you can see here, I have some work to do on this plant because it's starting to set some blooms. So, but otherwise than that, it's a pretty easy plant, and you can just come out, like I come out and just pick the leaves off of it, use it in my dishes. And then as we start to near fall, you can actually save your basil leaves by either A, cooking them, like putting them in your oven at the lowest degree it will go, and wait until they get kind of crumbly and start kind of fall apart, and then you can pull them out and put them in an airtight container, and you can keep them. Otherwise, what I have done in the past and had really good luck with is I'll actually take an ice cube tray like this one, and I'll cut up the basil leaves, and I'll stick them in here and put a little bit of water over top of them, and I'll stick them in the freezer, and then once they freeze, I'll put them in a freezer baggie, and that keeps them pretty good all winter. And then after that, you can just pop them out of that baggie, throw them in your soups or your pasta sauces, and use them all winter, which I did last winter, and they tasted really good. They had a nice kind of summery spring taste to your dishes. Otherwise, you could also make pesto, or otherwise you can blend them up in your blender with some olive oil and put them back in here and freeze them and stick them in our freezer baggie, and then you can cook them and saute other foods in them. So it's a pretty universal herb, and that's why I like having it in my garden, because I can use it in a lot of dishes. It's pretty easy to use, and it's just overall a really good plant to start off with if you're a beginning gardener. So thank you for taking a minute to grow and learning about basil.